I did a workshop once with a room full of lawyers, and the workshop included working on legal language to make it witty. And it is unbelievable. And what I learned from this is that no one ever lets the lawyers be creative. That's not part of their job, right? But man, when you let lawyers be creative, they can be really fun.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the CX Files, the podcast where we bring to you the very top CX professionals to talk to us about their experiences, their best practices and tips so that all of us can make our customer experiences better. If you're here for this episode, you already know that customer experience is important. But what makes for good customer experience? What are the ingredients of good customer experience? To talk to us today about that, we have Dan Gingiss, who's literally written a book on it. Correction, he's written 2 books on it. So just very brief introduction. Dan has held very senior positions in CX in companies like Discovery and McDonald's. He is the CEO of The Experience Maker, which is also the name of his book, by the way. And interestingly, CEO here stands for Chief Experience Officer and not Chief Executive Officer, which is fascinating. So without further ado, welcome, Dan. Great to have you here. Would you want to add to that introduction? I think I've done a very shallow job of it.
No, you did a great job, and I'm honored to be here. I was kind of hoping we'd get to talk about some paranormal activity as well, since it's the CX file. So I don't know if we're going to get to that.
You know, sometimes customer experience does feel like paranormal activity, right?
It does. It does indeed. No, I'm very, very excited to talk to you today.
Fantastic. Dan, I read your book. I've read it cover to cover twice now. I loved it, and not the least because I think there is the clearest framework of what goes into making memorable CX that I've ever come across. And we have a lot to dive in. So if we're going to start, can you start with that framework? Because I think that's valuable.
Of course, and I'm glad you find it clear because, as you know, simplicity is a key component of good customer experience. So it is meant to be simple. But the framework is called Wiser because I want you to be wiser than the competition when it comes to customer experience. And these are the steps that we have to take to create the kinds of experiences that our customers want to talk about. So I came from the marketing world, and word of mouth marketing is the holy grail. It's what every company wants because it drives referrals and new business. And I believe the very best way to get word of marketing is through remarkable experiences. So Wiser stands for witty, which is about not being hysterical, but just being clever and using language to your advantage. The I is immersive, which is about creating the kinds of experiences that people feel in their bones, usually because we've touched on either their emotions or one of their 5 senses. Shareable is the S, and that is happens not by accident, but happens with strategy. And it doesn't happen because we tell people to share. We've got to create that moment where they can't help themselves. They pull out their phone and they want to capture the photo or the video and tell other people about it. The E is about being extraordinary, which just simply means a little bit better than ordinary. And the good news is your competition is usually ordinary. Most experiences that we have as consumers or as B2B customers are ordinary. And so when we can be just a little bit extra, we can really stand out. And then the R is about being responsive, because when you get people talking about you, which you will do if you follow this methodology, you've got to be part of that conversation. I always like to joke with people, if I get off stage after a great keynote and somebody says, "Man, Dan, that was the best speech of the whole event," and then I just keep walking and I don't say thank you or I don't engage with them, they're going to think I'm a jerk. And yet every day we have millions of people that come onto social media and praise brands and say nice things about companies and share positive experiences. And then nobody responds to them. And that's such a missed opportunity, essentially just to say, "Hey, we love you back. Thanks for being our customer. We really value you."
Fantastic. So one thing I just realized, the framework Wiser, the acronym that you've given, is actually that fits the entire framework very well, right? It's so simple, and yet it's clever and extraordinary in the way that it's slightly clever, but conveys the meaning. It's very shareable. I'll remember it forever. So I think it fits the framework extraordinarily well. At one point in your book, you say that the goal is to make your brand lovers be heard more than your brand haters. And I love that idea because it's got a metric built into it, brand lovers versus brand haters, and there's somebody who's had to be louder, but also an objective built into this, right? So you know exactly what needs to be done to get the experiences in place. So can you talk about like makings of a good customer experience? What makes for a good customer experience, with some examples that you've come across in your day-to-day life and in your own practice?
Sure. Well, I want to start by explaining that idea of brand lovers being louder than brand haters. It actually came from my time working at McDonald's. And, there are a lot of people that hate McDonald's. There are people that the animal welfare activists. There are people that are anti-obesity. There are people that are fighting for minimum wage increases, right? There's a lot of people that don't like McDonald's. Of course, there's also billions of people that do like McDonald's. And one of the things that I figured out pretty quickly when I was heading up global social media there was we can't silence all the haters. There's just too many of them, right? And so the idea is let's just try to tilt the sentiment so that our brand lovers are louder, that they're making more noise on social media than the brand haters. You're never going to get rid of them. And that's true in almost every industry. There's always going to be some haters or some disgruntled customers that are going to try to make noise. And too often, you know the expression, the squeaky, what is it? The squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? Or something like that. It's but basically the haters are often the ones that get the attention. And really what we should be doing is focusing the attention on the lovers. So what Wiser does is it allows you to think about your customer journey in a different way. And really what that's about is understanding that every single interaction that we have with a customer is an opportunity to create an experience. And if you think about the interactions that you have with, just pick a brand, a Starbucks, a Disney, Amazon, there's so many interactions that we have. It's not just one. It's not just that we make a purchase and then that's it. Even the purchase has different steps along the way. And maybe we have to return a product or what have you. And so there's all of these interactions. And I think the best companies in the world, and those are three of the best companies in the world, have really figured out that each one of those interactions matters. And that if we focus on those interactions and make them better and make them memorable, then we're going to create more happy customers. And I just want to say that this doesn't have to be expensive. This doesn't have to be full of complex technology. This isn't operationally difficult. It's just about understanding what the customer is going through in each one of those interactions and trying to make it easier on them, maybe trying to make it a little bit more fun for them. Because if everybody else is ordinary, it doesn't take a whole lot to be different. It just takes a little bit of will and guts, to say we're not going to look like everybody else. There's an image that I show in my keynote presentation from a bookstore in Taiwan called Wugan Books. And the difference about this bookstore versus any other bookstore in the world is they've turned off all the lights. They have no overhead lights in this store. The only thing they have are little tiny pin lights on top of each book. So it almost looks like, in this image, that the books are floating on the shelves. It looks like an image out of a Harry Potter movie. And what happens when you turn off all of the lights is that instead of people wandering the aisles going from genre to genre, they walk up to a book and they spend time with a book and they interact with it. They flip the pages, they get immersed in it, and then they buy more books, which is not surprising because they've had an opportunity to have an experience. And so this is the difference between this bookstore and everyone else. They just turned off the lights.
Fantastic.
It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
Yeah, I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, the example of Starbucks is also a fascinating one. I've always been intrigued by the fact that people there get your names wrong, and you go back because they get your name wrong, right? It doesn't have to be clever. It just has to be interesting, right?
Absolutely. And anybody that thinks those names are for the baristas, you're wrong. The name is for the customer so that the customer sees that it's a personalized drink, right? Because the cool thing that really Starbucks pioneered is there's a billion different drinks that you can get at Starbucks. You can have it exactly your way. And then when they put your name on it, that's sort of stamping the fact that it's your drink. And everybody loves to see their name. And yes, you're right. When the names are wrong, it can be funny. And that is a shareable moment too.
Correct. It brings us to your the first element of your Wiser framework, which is wit, right? And you mentioned this in your book. It doesn't need to be haha funny, right?
Right.
Wit does not need to be haha funny. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's some brands out there that are haha funny. In the United States, Taco Bell, Wendy's. If you follow their both fast food restaurants, if you follow their posts on social media, they're very funny, and they've sort of earned that right to be a funny brand. But you might be in the insurance business or the banking business or something where being funny is not. It's probably not a positive for your business.
Yeah.
But being witty is different. It's about being clever. It's about being human. Talking like your customers, with your customers instead of at your customers. It can be as simple as not using acronyms and industry jargon, but just speaking in plain language. One of the best compliments I get about my book is people tell me it's a simple read. And I say, thank you, that's very intentional. I could have sat with a thesaurus and tried to find big words to make myself sound smart, but that isn't going to be the experience that I want to create for people. I want it to be approachable and easy to read so that you can read it twice like you do, right? And so, but in so many industries, and I would say financial services and insurance are two of the biggest, we use language that's very complicated. That most people don't understand. There's an anecdote in the book about the healthcare industry in the United States, literally knowing that 4 of the key words used in the industry that consumers don't understand, and yet every healthcare provider still uses those words. Why would we do that? Why would we still use language that we know consumers don't understand? So witty can be it can play in a broad space, but largely I would say if you can make your customer smile, then you are doing something right. You don't have to make them fall out of their chair laughing. You just have to make them smile. And so sometimes it's just a sign that we pass and we chuckle, and it brings a smile to our face. And especially today with so much going on in the world that makes you not smile, if we can get people to smile, they're gonna remember us for it. So that's the difference between being witty and being hysterical or being a stand-up comedian.
Yeah. But tell me, I mean, you touched upon it, right? So you are an insurance company, right? Organizationally, you are state, right? The people, I think it's almost self-selecting the kind of people who go into certain industries and the personality that they bring with them. How do you go from there and suddenly become witty?
So it doesn't happen overnight, but you look for some places where it makes sense. I did a workshop once with a room full of lawyers, and the workshop included working on legal language to make it witty. And it is unbelievable. And what I learned from this is that no one ever lets the lawyers be creative. That's not part of their job, right? But man, when you let lawyers be creative, they can be really fun. Yeah. And so we started rewriting some of the legal language to just be more fun. And you know what happens when your legal disclaimers are fun? Customers read them, which is exactly what we want, because the language is there to make sure that the customer understands what they're getting themselves into. And yet in so many cases, we put it in language that there's no chance they're going to understand what they're getting into. But if you make it fun to read and you insert a couple of jokes, even you might have seen every once in a while, you'll see a company, instead of it saying, legal disclaimers, it'll say a word from our lawyers. Okay. Or our lawyers made us write this. Yeah. Right. That gets you interested enough to be like, oh, I want to learn more. I want to read a little more. You don't fall off your chair laughing, but it is a more approachable. I think with health insurance, or insurance in general, it's not a funny industry, right? So it is not about we're not trying to make people laugh, but people have a lot of choices in where they can get their insurance or where they have their banking business, right? And so one of the things that's going to impact that choice, there's many things, but one of them is going to be how the company makes the customer feel. And if the customer feels like they know me, they get me, they make me smile, that is going to go a long way to a customer saying, I'm very happy with my insurance company or my bank.
Right. Do you when you go into organizations helping them change the way they operate, do you find some kind of initial pushback? Because I think it's almost like going against the personality, right? How do you handle something like that?
Yeah, so a lot of industries think that they are boring industries.
And they have to, and they feel they have to be.
Yes, and I do want to clarify, right? Like, we want our bank to be safe and secure, and like there are things that are more important for a bank than being witty. And I also should clarify that not every company has to use every letter of WISE. So for a bank, it might make more sense to be immersive or extraordinary, and certainly to be responsive, than it does to be witty. So it is important that you can pick and choose these letters. They work better when you do more of them, but you don't have to do all of them. And so there are certain places, when you go to the hospital, right? The hospital is a fairly serious place. Now, if you're in the hospital and somebody makes you smile, and there's a wonderful example in my keynote, unfortunately I got it too late for the book, where a hospital does make a patient smile, that's a game changer, right? Because we don't expect to smile when we come into a hospital. And so it's just about looking for maybe a moment within the entire journey. It's not about that the whole journey now has to make us smile, or that every piece of communication has to make us laugh. It's not that. It's about finding the right moment and sort of pressing down on it. And I do think it's possible in almost every industry, because we do need levity in our lives. We need to be able to smile. We need to be able to exhale, because a lot of times life is stressful, and we want to know that the companies that we're doing business with are there for us, and that they know us. And that's a lot of what witty ends up being about.
Correct. I almost feel like the idea of wit is to break down that gap between a company and the user, right? So a lot of local banks thrive because there is a lot of connection between who's sitting behind the desk and you, because you know that person. You can go talk to that person. That person is talking your language. There is a lot of empathy involved. I think just taking that whole verbiage that you were talking about and making it more like in the customer lingo, something that translates to them, I think just makes it easier for the customer to empathize. I mean, they feel like they're in a conversation and not just spoken to.
Yeah, I call it being more human. And one of the things that the pandemic taught us, when we had to spend so much time without other humans, we ended up really craving human interaction. And so when we can be human, when we can provide that to people, it's memorable. My dad, who is 81 years old, has never used an ATM card, a cash card. He always walks into the local bank because he likes it when they say, "Good morning, Mr. Gingiss." That makes him feel good, right? And so that I put that in the witty category, even though it's not funny, but it does make him feel good, and it makes him smile, and it makes him feel like, hey, this bank knows me. And those are all things that give us confidence in our choice of providers that we've made. You've heard of the term buyer's remorse. This is true of every business that we work with, whether it is as a consumer or even in the B2B space. If we're buying software at our company, the minute we sign the contract, we start to have buyer's remorse because we're worried we picked the wrong vendor, right? And so what companies can do is specifically work to avoid that buyer's remorse, to remind customers that they made a good choice in doing business with them, right? And a lot of that comes from, as you pointed out, personalization, getting to know the person, not referring to them as an account number or a frequent flyer number, but as a name and a person. My bank, for a long time, on the website, when I logged in, it would say, "Good morning, Daniel." And they think they're being personalized because they know it's morning and because my legal name is Daniel. What they don't know is that the only person that calls me Daniel is my mother, and only when she's mad at me. So
Yeah.
I don't want anyone calling me Daniel. I don't answer to Daniel.
Yeah.
Now, one day I logged in and it said, and the bank had a pop-up and it said, "What would you like us to call you?" And so then I wrote Dan, and now it says, "Good morning, Dan." So now I feel like the bank knows me.
Yeah.
They thought that they were trying to be personalized when they said, "Good morning, Daniel," but in fact, it had the opposite effect on me.
Right.
It reminded me that they didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. And so even little things, getting back to the names on the cups at Starbucks, right? If you're going to use my name, please do it right. And please do it the way that I want to be called, because that's important to me. My name is important. Everybody's name is important to me.
But I think you bring a very important point. I think in the day and age where there is so much automation and mass marketing, it's almost hard to be witty, right? Because wit is also person specific, right? And I'm not saying again, haha witty. Even "Good morning, Mr. Gingiss" is, as you said, is witty because people remember it. People come back for it.
Right.
What do you think is the future of wit in CX, given the direction that we are going into?
So I don't think humor is going away, and I don't think wittiness is going away, because people appreciate it. Yeah. Right. I send out a weekly newsletter, and at the bottom of every newsletter, if you read the fine print after the unsubscribe button and all that sort of stuff, there's always a little sentence or a joke or something that if you've read all the way to the end, you get to have a little smile, right? Yeah. And so there's places where we can hide stuff. On my website, if you get an error page, right? You have a URL that's bad. You don't get a page that says 404 error. Yeah. You get a page that's going to make you smile. Yeah. And that is intended to be an experience for you. And think about that for a second. When we get to an error page, that's a user error, right? Usually it is that the user made a mistake. Sometimes the company or it's the website's error. But so the user made a mistake. Now that's a key moment, because the user is trying to go somewhere. They have made a mistake, and so now they have an error page. And so what happens next? Well, if we can make them smile, that's great, because they're clearly not happy, right? They hit an error page, right? But if we can make them smile and we can help them get back to where they wanted to go, then it becomes a memorable moment. Yeah. Then what happens is somebody forwards that page to someone and says, "You'll never believe what happened when I hit an error page on Dan's site." And now people are talking about something that doesn't have anything to do with me as a speaker or an author, but does help my brand, because people see that this brand can be humorous, can be fun. I do the same thing with my privacy policy, right? Does anybody read my privacy policy? Probably not. However, if you go to that page, you're going to start reading and you're going to be like, wow, this is a cool privacy policy. I think I want to learn more, right? It's a little bit fun. It still says all of the things that you have to say in a privacy policy, because that's serious business, right? You can't joke around with privacy, but you can still have a little bit of humanity and make people smile while they're reading it. So I think there's always a place for it. We obviously have to be aware of what our customer is going through, right? If they have just experienced a major tragedy, it's probably not the time to be witty. Okay, so we do have to be human enough to understand there's a time and a place for all of this. But I'm more talking about the moments that are unexpected, or sometimes the moments that have no experience at all. So think about waiting on hold, right? I mean, that's sort of an empty experience, but man, if you could make it into a memorable experience, that's you're moving the ball forward in terms of your overall perception of your customer experience.
Right. No, it reminds me of a restaurant in India, and I think they got inspired by a restaurant in US, where I went and gave my order and was waiting for my order, and they gave me a puzzle to solve. And the deal was that if I solved the puzzle before the order comes, the order's free. Right? So they've taken the worst part of the experience, and now I'm almost hoping that my food is late so that I get it free. Right?
That's awesome. I love that idea. And it allows them to work on their operations and maybe even take an extra 30 seconds to a minute or something, because they know the customer's engaged. It's a brilliant idea. There's a coffee shop in San Francisco that caters to a lot of stay-at-home moms, and so they often come with their kids. And so the napkins at this place have a tic-tac-toe board and a little word search, and like it's something to do for the kids because they know that the moms just want to have a moment of quiet and solitude while they're drinking their coffee, but the kids are there, and so they insert something into the experience to help with that. And it's just a wonderful way to create something that's memorable and that's shareable. I'm sure the people that solve that puzzle, the first thing they do is take a picture of it or something and say, look, I got a free deal because I solved this puzzle, right?
Correct. Brings me back to the point you were making with empowering your brand lovers, right? You give them something that they have to talk about. That's how they'll get louder. That's how they'll get louder than the haters, which is why I love that sentence. It's like underlined twice on my on my copy. But this is great, and I think we can keep talking more and more about your framework and your experiences and the examples that you bring to the table. But we are actually hitting around 25-minute mark, and I want to do one more section, which is the most interesting section of this podcast, which is the rapid fire. Now, this rapid fire is about CX in general, not related to what we have discussed till now. So feel free, no bounds, anything related to CX goes here. So if you're ready, the only requirement is that you need to be fast.
I'll do my best.
All right, so here we go. One word that describes perfect customer experience.
A perfect customer experience?
Yeah, one word or one phrase.
Remarkable.
Fantastic. Okay. The most important CX metric as per you?
I would say customer retention rate.
Interesting. The brand that you admire most for its customer experience?
Starbucks.
Okay. The biggest myth about customer experience?
That it is difficult and expensive.
Fantastic. I think this is great. Fantastic. I love it. The future of customer experience in one word?
Exciting.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. One tool or technology you think is going to change CX going forward?
This is the obvious one, but let's say AI. And I think it can change it for the positive and will.
Fantastic. The most challenging aspect of delivering great CX?
Executive buy-in.
I agree. Completely agree. I'm on board with that. One book or resource that you would recommend to anybody related to CX?
One of my favorite new books is by Brittany Hodak. It's called Creating Superfans. She was in the music industry for a long time and really understands why musicians like Taylor Swift have so many fans, and she takes that and applies it to businesses. It's a great read.
What a left field idea. Dan, which reminds me, if you could share the link to your book, I would love to share it with my audience as well. I think it's something that people should read. I would highly recommend you guys read this.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah. Next one, the best piece of CX advice you have ever received?
This one comes from my mom, and she wasn't talking about customer experience. Whenever I travel, she reminds me to be aware of my surroundings. It's a real mom piece of advice, right?
Daniel, remember that.
But I actually think that is the best advice for customer experience is just pay attention to the world around you, and you're going to see how many experiences you have every day. And it's going to give you ideas for what you can do in your business.
No, that's wonderful. I mean, kudos to your mom. If there is one thing you could change about CX industry the way it is today, what would that be?
That CX shouldn't be a department in the business. Everyone's job should include CX. It should be part of every single person's job description, no matter where they are in the company.
Yeah, fantastic. And we are at the end of it. So thank you so much, Daniel. That was great answers and really fast. So thank you for that. But also thanks a lot for your insights on your framework of creating great customer experience and sharing with us not just that framework, but also some details and experiences that you've had implementing these kind of experiences for your audiences. And I know you do a lot of Keynote, and I have heard a few on YouTube. I hope at some point someday I would be sitting in the audience in one of those keynotes, because some of the things you talked about that you show in your keynote is so exciting. I would love to see those. So thank you again.
Well, it would be a pleasure to have you. And I haven't yet done a keynote in India, but I'd like to add that to the bucket list right now.
Yeah, you should absolutely. And let me know if I can be of any help at any point. I'll be happy to be. Of any help I could be. But
Well,
thank you so much, Dan. It was fantastic. I loved our discussion today.
My pleasure. Thank you too for having me.
All right. Take care.